All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out despite all the corona panic. So happy to be here. Today I'll talk about one of our projects with Unilever, which has been in production for a few months and is a nice example of an actual use case and project in production using blockchain in Asia. So we just had the session about blockchain adoption in Asia. This project is in Vietnam and is a nice example, tangible example for a real application. So I'll talk about a few points. So first of all, a quick intro about who we are, ScanTrust, what do we do? Then I'll move over to the business background of the project. So what was the motivation for the project to start? And I'll give an overview of the project in general. What was the use case and how did we implement the blockchain solution? How did we integrate the project into the operations? And what did we learn from this project? So quickly about us, ScanTrust. So we are a company headquartered in Switzerland with offices in Shanghai, Amsterdam, Kiev, and a few other outposts. And we've been active in the market now for 5 years. And we are focused on digitizing supply chains. That's at the core of what we do, giving each physical product a digital identity to be able to track it in a supply chain. We have two main customer groups. One is food and beverage in the FMCG space, and the other one are industrial good companies such as chemicals, automotive, and precision industry. And at the core, there's 3 things that we focus on. First one, establishing end-to-end transparency in a supply chain. Second, enabling touch points based on QR codes, for example, with consumers at the point of sale. And third is preventing counterfeits, so protecting your products from being faked. And the company originally started out around one specific invention, one patent that we have developed, which was developed at EPFL, the Technical University in Lausanne. And what we have invented is a secure and unique QR code that cannot be copied. So that's a unique identifier with a special graphic in the middle that makes this QR code copy-proof. So once you have printed this QR code, there's no way you can fake it because you can detect fakes with an image processing algorithm in our backend. And around this patent and technology that we have developed, we have also built a whole what we call smart packaging platform. Because if you are looking at counterfeits and traceability in supply chain, and unique QR codes, you also need a platform to manage these unique identifiers. And that's the second element of our offering. It's a platform that allows you to manage and generate unique QR codes. So you have all the different tools that you need to do that, integration with printers, software to generate QR codes, and tools to track when and where these QR codes have been scanned, in what region, different analytics such as alerts if a QR code is scanned in a market where it's not supposed to be scanned, and more. And we have designed this system in a very open way, such that it can also be integrated with ERPs or with blockchain solutions. So at the core, we're not a blockchain company. We're an anti-counterfeit and digitization company. But 2 years ago, we started getting more and more inquiries from our customers in the supply chain space for blockchain applications. And that's why ScanTrust also started positioning itself and investing into the blockchain space. So we see blockchain as a separate tool that can be integrated with our core unique identifier and QR code platform. So a few example applications of where our codes are on, from seeds, vegetable seeds, to water filters, to spare parts, to baby milk, to pork meat soups, which is what we will be talking about today. So one of the projects that we implemented in the blockchain space was with Unilever in Vietnam, specifically with the brand called Knorr, that maybe some of you know. Knorr is one of the oldest and largest brands of Unilever, which makes all types of soups. And one of those soups is pork soup. So I'll talk about why this project was started and what the business rationale of Unilever was, and then a bit more in detail about the actual implementation from a technical and operational point of view. So in terms of the business background, how did this project even come alive, and what was the rationale for it? So in Vietnam, Unilever is the market leader for pork meat soups with Knorr. So they have consistently had the highest market share, but they have one competitor that is quite tight to them. Its name is Ajinomoto. It's a Japanese soup brand, and they are kind of racing each other in the market for who holds the top position. And Knorr is more of a premium brand, whereas Ajinomoto is a little more, let's say, budget option for a similar type of soup. And Knorr has always been the leader in the cities, but recently Ajinomoto started catching up a lot of market share in the rural area, and they started to lose market share. So Knorr started looking for ways of how can they differentiate themselves in the market, and how can they increase the trust and perception of the rural population to purchase your brand, their brand, instead of the product of their competitor. So they started brainstorming around different ideas. How can we differentiate our brand and make a stronger case for the rural population to buy our product? And so they asked themselves, what is our next big thing? How can we differentiate ourselves from our competitor? And that's how they came up with the project that I'll be talking about now. So the solution that they came up with was they looked at their own product, the Knorr product, and they analyzed what are like the things that people really care about and the things that can set them apart from their competitor. And one thing is they have a very strong claim in the market, which is that this Knorr brand is made from carefully selected clean pork farms. And this claim of our pork meat is clean is something that their competitor cannot claim, because they don't have enough evidence that all the pork meat in their soups is actually coming from clean certified farms. And so they realized that this could be one of the arguments that they could use to differentiate themselves against their competitor. At the same time, what they also realized is that this claim was not perceived that strongly by the rural population. It was received well by people in the cities who appealed to this concept of clean pork, and who also indicated that they believe that the soups have better taste because of that, but less so for the rural population that for some reason didn't trust this claim enough. So they realized that they have an opportunity to build trust and transparency around this clean pork standard and develop a messaging around food safety and around clean pork farms. And that's what they then decided to focus on. So they launched a whole campaign which was focused on this real, honest, and authentic messaging. And this campaign was built on 3 pillars. So the first one is they developed a new marketing and communication campaign where they communicated the superior quality aspects of their pork meat soups to their consumers. And as part of that, they also developed a whole TV commercial, which I can show.
Bạn có biết hạt nêm Knorr được làm từ nguồn thịt lợn tươi ngon của trang trại sạch chuẩn Việt Gáp? Nguồn thịt thăn xương ống và tủy của Knorr được hầm trong nhiều giờ, cho món ăn thêm tươi ngọt.
Anyways, it's in Vietnamese, so
Ngon quá mẹ ơi.
we wouldn't understand it anyways. But it's a beautiful TV commercial
Knorr, vị ngon
that
tươi
they
ngọt
launched
từ
in
trang
order
trại
to
sạch.
communicate
Quét
the
mã
superior
QR,
quality,
tìm hiểu
aspect.
trang trại heo sạch chuẩn Việt Gáp.
Someone is having struggles here in the back. The second component of their campaign was smart packaging. So they brainstormed around ideas, how can we use our packaging itself rather than commercials to communicate with the customers? And that's where the idea came up, to use the packaging to communicate the provenance of the pork meat to the end consumers and show them that the pork meat is indeed coming from clean and certified pork farms in Vietnam, something that their competitor cannot say. And the third element was they also improved some quality aspects of their product. And it is this second pillar here in the middle where we as ScanTrust were brought on as a partner for this project. So I'll explain a bit how this solution was developed that today enables consumers to scan a QR code in Vietnam on their Knorr soups and check all the different steps along the supply chain of the pork meat ingredient in the Knorr soups. So the project was launched on 22nd July last year and has been live now since more than 6 months in Vietnam. And there's approximately 30 million packs in the market, which have an individual QR code from ScanTrust linked to a blockchain-based solution, which shows where the pork meat in the soups is coming from. So it's not a POC in that sense. It's an actual, in the mind of Unilever, it's still a pilot project because it's a limited amount of time in one region, but it's definitely production scale in a sense that it's 30 million units that have the code in the market, and there's real users scanning and using the solution on a daily basis. So what we did is the first nut we had to crack is to actually map out the supply chain together with Unilever. So there's 3 parties that are involved. First of all, there's 2 pork meat farms in Vietnam that produce the porks. Second, there are 2 meat processors. So these are facilities that take the pork meat and then slaughter the pork and process it. And third, there is the Unilever soup production facility, which takes the pork meat, processes it into powder, and then packages it and ships it. So before even starting to develop anything, the first exercise we had to do together with Unilever is map out the supply chain, understand who are the suppliers and what is the data that we are able to get, and that we then also want to show to the consumer as a proof of claim that the meat that you are eating in this soup is coming from clean pork farms. So the number of parameters that we identified were the farm details and certifications that the farm has, then the lot number and shipment details from the meat processors, and the production batch ID of the soup powder that is produced in Unilever. So the way the provenance as such is established is that there is a batch of pork, so 1,000 pigs, that get shipped to the meat processing facility, and they get butchered on a certain date. So then there is a date, and there is a lot number from this processed meat. Then this processed meat gets shipped to the powdering facility, which takes it and then processes it into soups, and also has a date and the batch number. And then there are X amount of QR codes that get linked to this batch of produced soups. And we link these different IDs together, so the batch number with the lot number with the farm ID and the QR codes, and that's then in the end when you scan a QR code, it retrieves this record from the blockchain that was previously uploaded. So after we had done this exercise, we had mapped out the whole supply chain, and then actually we had all the information available that we needed to develop the solution. So why do we need blockchain here as an intermediary step? So to critically also assess that, there were 2 arguments why blockchain was proposed as a solution here. The first one is a data governance question. So the supply chain in Vietnam is a very short one, and there were 2 farms and 2 meat processors involved. So maybe potentially like there is not such a huge mistrust issue because these suppliers know each other. But if you want to make this scalable for the Knorr brand globally in other countries, there's going to be thousands of suppliers and farms that are involved. And so they chose to use blockchain as a technology to be sure that you have a solution that can scale to multiple suppliers from the start without having a data governance and trust issue. And the second argument was a consumer trust argument. So if you are using blockchain to prove a claim to a consumer, You would want this data to be immutable so that the consumer can trust that it hasn't been manipulated and the information he sees is authentic. So technical implementation, how did this actually work, and how did we develop it? So there were two technologies that we used. On the one hand, it was our own platform from ScanTrust, which was mainly used for the unique ID management. So every Knorr, every pack of these 30 million soup packs has a unique QR code printed on it, which is an identity that lives in our system, and you can track and manage in terms of, you can see when it was scanned and where, and you can adjust the content that gets displayed to the consumer. And the second part is, as a blockchain platform, we used Hyperledger Sawtooth, mainly because it seems to be the Hyperledger protocol that is used for supply chain use cases. It's also embedded in the Hyperledger Grid initiative. It promises to be scalable, and since we were dealing with 30 million products, we thought scalability is something that is important. And it has a global community designed for enterprise, so we chose this as a protocol 1.5 years ago when we started with the project. In terms of the actual technical implementation, this is a highly simplified architecture diagram. So the technical solution as such consists of from a very high level of 5 components. So first, there is an application interface. So this is an online portal, a web-based solution that allows the actors in the supply chain, so the meat processors and the production facility, to upload the information about the produced pork meat, so the batch numbers, lot numbers, shipment dates, and so on. I'll show what that looks like in a second. The second component is the consumer interface. So this is the mobile web page that the consumer gets after he scanned the QR code. And then the backend is based on the ScanTrust system, where all the QR codes live, and a private blockchain network based on Hyperledger Sawtooth. It's actually a little bit more complex than here because there's also a database involved, since if you have 30 million QR codes, you cannot do queries to the blockchain in real time, so you need a buffer in between. So the actual architecture is a bit more complex than what you see here, but from a high level, that's what it is. And then there's also an integration to Unilever's ERP system to pull some of the information. So this is what we call the blockchain connector, so the portal that the actors can use to upload information. Here you see a couple of screenshots of what it looks like. So you have an interface to register farms and upload a new farm that is part of the system and manage this identity. You have an interface for the meat processors to record a new shipment from which farm this came and which date it was, what production lot number it was. And then there is also an interface for the soup production facility that can then upload the batch of soup that was produced. So that's like the interface for the actors in the supply chain. And then the consumer interface, I'll show a quick demo of this as well. This is the response that the consumer gets after he has scanned the QR code. So this is now an example QR code that was scanned. So you scan it, and then this makes a request to our system, and this looks up the information corresponding to this specific pack of soup and loads it from the blockchain. And it shows you a number of things. So first it shows you the product as such, and then here you see the actual track and trace history of where the pork meat is coming from. On the one hand, on a map with dates and geolocation. So here you see how the meat went from the farm to the processing facility to then the location where the product was scanned. Maybe I'll speed it up a little bit. Or we just leave it, that's fine. So this is the map-based view, and then there is also the actual steps in the supply chain. Again, you see it's in Vietnamese, so we don't actually see what it means, but this is the step from the farm. Second step is the processor. Third step is the production facility. Fourth step is the scan. Then additionally, you see the details of the farm and the certifications that the farm has. So you can retrieve the actual certificate that shows that the farm has the required certifications for clean pork regarding the water that was used and the fact that no hormones were put into the pork. And then after that, this is like the provenance view that shows the history of the pork meat. And after that, Unilever also uses this touch point that now they have with the consumer for all types of other things, which was also one of the aspects that then justified the business case for this project. For example, they use it as a touch point to sign up the consumer into their loyalty community. So they say, hey, after you have checked this, also join our loyalty program. Third thing is they use it to give them recommendations on recipes, how they can use the soups with other ingredients. And last, they also give them recommendations on other products that they can buy which are somehow related to the soup that they have. And this is how they are really trying to use this touch point that they now get with the consumer to the fullest to build up this two-way connection with their consumer. So this was the technical part, like the software development part. But apart from that, and I think this was the real challenge to crack in the project, there's the operations and the launch of the solution. So we from the blockchain community always talk about software development challenges and scalability and so on. But when you do an actual supply chain project, there's one part which is also really important, which is how do you integrate a solution into an existing supply chain process? What does it mean to print a unique QR code on each soup pack, and how do you ensure that each soup pack has the correct information that it should belong to, and how do you create all these links? And that's a whole world for itself. So to give you an example here, traditionally Unilever prints their packaging with an offset machine, so that's an offset printer. It's a printer where you put in a template and then it just prints millions of times the exact same thing. But now, all of a sudden, we have a unique QR code that needs to be embedded into the packaging, and this should not slow down the speed at which they can print. So how did we solve this for this project? Is they left the rest of the packaging as it was before, and they added an empty spot for a unique QR code. So they had a hybrid printing process. First, they printed all the packaging, and then they installed a new digital printer line in the production line, which was able to print unique QR codes on the product. So that was the printing challenge. And the other thing is usually the way that production works is that labels for products are pre-printed. So they're pre-printed, and then once the meat and the product arrive, only then is the packaging used and processed. So this means there were millions of pre-printed Knorr soup packs with QR codes already on them, and then somehow we had to create the link between the meat that is arriving and the QR code where this meat is going to be put into. And this means that in the production line, each QR code had to be scanned and then associated with the meat batch that it belongs to. And for this, also to give you an example, we had to install an inline camera in Unilever's facility that was scanning each individual QR code and then sending the file to us, and we can then associate the QR code with the meat it belongs to. And this was again a process that required a lot of testing to ensure that it doesn't slow down the operations of Unilever. So this is the operations view. And then the third thing that is really important, and here we were a little bit less involved, is that a QR code-based solution is only as effective as the amount of people that know about it and the amount of people that actually scan it. And that's why then Unilever, with a little bit of support from our side, did like a whole launch campaign where they advertised that now they have a QR code on their product packaging. So this was a 360-degree launch, which was done in the Knorr category and then sometimes also combined with other categories like drinks that Unilever has. So that was a whole multi-channel effort that they did with TV ads, in-store ads, and so on. Yeah, so that's the TV ad again. So what did we get out of the project, and what were like lessons learned? So first of all, I think it was a strong co-innovation push towards product transparency. It was quite a bold step that Unilever took in this case, and quite a big investment that they made to make this solution happen, not only into like a blockchain solution, but also in adjusting their operations. So we had a few learnings with regards to how to make such a unique identifier project happen. Yeah, and then learnings that we had is, okay, this was now based on 30 million codes. How can we scale this solution globally? That's a challenge that we are still working on, because this was now implemented for one particular facility in Vietnam, but it doesn't mean that the processes in that facility work in the same way as they work in Germany or in the US or in Indonesia or in Thailand. So you might have to repeat the same supply chain mapping exercise for all the other places where this soup is produced. And then the last learning was that we definitely need to improve the architecture and the design of it if you talk about a blockchain-based solution, if we want to do a global rollout. So Sawtooth was definitely a good solution, but we also realized the limitations that it has, and the areas where it can still be improved, such as scalability and actual stability of the network. So if you have a solution that is in the market, you need to make sure that everything runs, and the blockchain network or other things just don't stop all of a sudden. And we had to do quite some work in ensuring that we have an enterprise-ready infrastructure that also works in such an environment. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I hope that gave you a good example of like an actual project and what it means to roll out a solution not only as a POC, but as an actual solution in the market. And I think we have around 10 minutes left, so we can take some questions. Yeah.
Why didn't you just printed the labels based on the batches opposed to individual packs?
That's a good question. That it is an option, but one main benefit that Unilever wanted to get out of this project is consumer interactions. And we as ScanTrust, we have a system that allows you to track each individual QR code. So you can see how many times and where is this individual QR code being scanned. And if you connect this with data from Google Analytics, you can, at a sufficiently high number of scans, you can also derive like whether unique codes in Ho Chi Minh are scanned by males or females, and so on. That's one reason. So the consumer demographic and insights part, if you have one code per batch, which maybe one batch of meat generates like 1,000 packs, you're not able to like, you see that one batch code is scanned in thousands of locations. Whereas if you have an individual code per pack, you can see that this individual pack was scanned 5 times. So you know, okay, consumers seem to scan packs more than once, or they scan it like at this time of the day, and so on. That was one reason. And the other reason is also just for security concerns. If you have a unique QR code on a soup pack, you can also detect if maybe someone is like faking your products. If you have like one soup that is scanned in 1,000 different places, all of a sudden you can derive that probably someone is copying your soups. So that was the other reason. Yes?
So how do you tie your identifier, your identity in that QR code to the actual identifier as a product? Because every product, including that Knorr soup packet, has a UPC code, which is that identifier for that class level item. Are you making an association there? And is the QR code simply for that consumer interaction, but because this is how it goes through supply chain by this number today?
Yeah, so you're talking about the SKU number. And it's not really necessary to tie the QR code to the SKU. We have this ability in our system, so a QR code can be tied to an infinite number of...
I'm not talking about the SKU, I'm talking about the UPC that makes it go deep across the...
The barcode, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the QR code is not really used for the point of sale. So it,
It's a secondary.
yes, so we could, in theory, try to do that. We can try to embed the barcode ID into the QR code, but to my knowledge, I don't think that the Vietnamese point of sale systems are able to scan QR codes. So there is still a barcode and a QR code. Our dream is, of course, that at some point we only have a QR code on a product, and you can use those with point of sale systems as well. Yeah. Yes.
You've been doing this for half a year. How long are you going to keep that first batch data live or available?
As long as Unilever wants to support it. So from our side, right now, like the whole solution is done over a period of 18 months. That's a first trial to see how many people scan it and so on. And after that, we need to reevaluate how to continue. Yes.
Yeah, apologies if I missed it, and maybe it's too soon to tell, but have they seen an actual uplift in their sales as a result of this? How many of the 30 million are being scanned?
Yeah.
And then the second part of the question is there any data around, as a consumer, are they more worried about the origin of that product? Or are they worried about the actual points that it's getting along the supply chain? Is there any thoughts you have around that?
Yeah, so regarding the first question, I mean, part of that information is confidential because that's Unilever info. What I can say is they have experienced a sales increase in the last months. Now, it's hard to judge if this was because of the blockchain solution or because of other factors, but they are experiencing sales increases. And there is a sufficiently high number of people that are actually scanning the solution. I can't tell you the exact percentage because that's Unilever's info, but I can say that there's quite a good scan rate of people that are actually scanning. And that's also one advantage that you have in Asia, that QR code adoption is a lot higher than in Europe and in the US. With regards to the second question, whether consumers care about the different steps of the supply chain, I think what Unilever found in terms of research before the project was that they have this, they call it Nielsen social listening indicator. So they use this to extract themes from social media and from other topics, and they realized that food safety was a very dominant topic among consumers in Vietnam because there had been scandals in the past, and Vietnam is very close to China, and there's a lot of food scandals in that area. So they knew that this topic of food safety is actually very important. Now, what we're also doing is they have in the next release now, we have embedded a small survey in the landing page, which pops up after the consumer scans it, with a few questions that vary every month, and Unilever can just flexibly adjust. And with that, they're trying to get some more feedback on consumer preferences and what they really care about. Yes?
Manufacturers and suppliers and the factories, how are they integrating with the system? You demonstrate the CSV approach?
Yeah.
Any other options?
So right now, they're using CSV file uploads to, and sometimes integrations to the ERP system to upload information to the blockchain. In the future, it should be IoT-based or something in that direction, but for the first phase, we worked with what we had, which was CSV and ERP integrations. Yes?
You mentioned, I believe, that you said that farms upstream the supply chain had unique identifiers assigned to them. I'm just wondering how that was handled. Is that you assigning those numbers to the farm, or was it Unilever or someone else?
So in the first phase of the project, now there were 2 farms involved, so it wasn't a whole lot of farms. And what we just did is we registered the farm in the system as as a user or as a trusted farm from where meat is coming from. And then if you scale this up to thousands of farms, then you might think of implementing a farmer management system or ID management system. Or if you look at individual farmers, for example, you could use some kind of identity system to manage all these different identities. I think we have 2-3 more minutes, so if there's any, yes?
There is someone certificating that this farmer is really clean. I mean, who's guaranteed that this farmer is really clean? Or?
That's a good question. So today it's a certification body. I don't know the name, to be honest, of like the actual entity that issues the certificate. I can look that up. So it's a third party that is certifying that and doing inspections. What is interesting about this whole space of certification is I personally believe that in the future, as we have more and more IoT sensors in place, I think we can move into a real-time certification environment where you don't need someone to walk there and check, but with sensors you can monitor the parameters that are relevant is, has the pork received clean water and has the pork been fed with any hormones. And these are things that in theory you can measure with biometric sensors and with water sensors. So maybe in the future we're able to automate that rather than relying on certificates.
Any plans to embark that working on this platform?
Sorry?
Are there any plans to integrate this with the authority?
We've had numerous conversations with certifiers in the past, and we're very interested in working together with them. They're not the parties that are the fastest to move, unfortunately, but they are a very relevant party for these projects. All right. I think we're done. Thank you.